Good morning and good afternoon to everyone who's joining us from Latin America and Europe for today's session on Torino's rebirth and transformation through urban regeneration and social innovation. My name is Trisha Hackett, and I'm the leader of City to City Cooperation for the International Urban and Regional Cooperation Program for Latin America region, which is the organization organizing this webinar. For those of you who don't know the for those of you who don't know the initiative, I'm just hearing some background noise. Maybe somebody needs to put their somebody can put their go on mute who's listening in. You have background noise. Okay. The IURC is a European Union funded initiative that promotes the exchange of best practice in urban development and regional innovation in Latin America region in 24 cities and 20 regions. The global program, however, includes more than 160 cities and regions from across the world. So before we dive in, I have a couple of housekeeping notes. We'd love to know where you are joining us from. Right now, I'm just outside of Chicago. But please tell us your name and maybe the area you work in, department, your title, and where you're joining us from, so we can know who you are and where you are and what you do and why you're here for us. Also, the webinar has simultaneous translation, and it will be in English, but we have translation in Spanish and Portuguese. So you can choose your preferred language at the bottom of the screen. And also, we like for this to be as interactive as possible. So please, when a question pops into your mind, please put it in the Q&A box, a question related to this session in the Q&A box. So at the end, we'll have time to have a bit of discussion and Q&A. So I'm especially looking forward to this session today, as I've had the great pleasure of supporting Torino and Baltimore in their city-to-city cooperation during the first phase of the IURC program, as they shared knowledge and experiences of social innovation and social entrepreneurship and urban regeneration of post-industrial cities, and was really one of our star pairings who managed to have, in addition to the core milestones of the program, many other opportunities or created opportunities for collaboration between the two cities, and continue to work together and explore areas of collaboration. So they're a great success story from the first phase of the IUC program. Our main objective today is to offer the IURC cohort of cities and regions and our program stakeholders, whether or not you're going to be attending the Cities Forum, an opportunity to learn about the processes that the city of Torino has undertaken to move from a highly industrialized, economically powerful, say a gray city, as in the title of the webinar, to a city that underwent great economic and social upheaval and crisis, you could say, to the Torino of today, which is really an inspiration and model of public and social technological innovation, social inclusion, and a city that's is green and moving towards being greener and ever more sustainable. So this is a preview for those of us lucky enough to go to the Cities Forum in a couple of weeks' time. And for those of you who can't, this is a great opportunity for you to learn about Torino's great story and to learn lessons from their experience. And one of the things that I have always loved about working with Torino is that the kind of honesty and openness about the challenges that the city has faced and the barriers and how the city has worked and is working to overcome them. So there's a lot of opportunities for learning from other cities in a lot of different realms. We're delighted that Torino is going to host the 2023 edition of the Cities Forum. It's an event that brings together key urban stakeholders from Europe, national, regional, and local levels who are committed to green and just futures. Fabrizio shortly is going to tell us a lot more about that. I'm going to quickly introduce the panel, the distinguished panel that we have with us today. So first, we have Fabrizio Fabriero, who's the head of EU Funds and Innovation Department for the City of Torino. Fabrizio is a specialist in public administration, cohesion policy, open and social innovation, and local development. And according to me, possibly one of Torino's biggest cheerleaders. Next, we have our whole panel are cheerleaders, but Fabrizio is really out there as a cheerleader for Torino. Giulietta Fassino, who's a cultural and activities manager, who's our lead contact in the first phase of the IURC program. She's with the Torino Urban Lab. Giulietta has a PhD in the history of architecture and urbanism, and really look forward to Giulietta's presentation. And last but not least, we have Giovanni Ferrero, who's a program manager in Urban Regeneration Department, City of Torino, and has a PhD in urban planning. And we're going to have a deep dive with Giovanni in some of the really interesting projects, programs, cases that are happening in Torino. We'll luckily for some of us get to see the site visits in real life in Cities Forum, but we'll hear about them from Giovanni. So just before we kick off, or before we dive in, just a reminder that there is translation, and please share your questions with us, and have tried to make this as interactive as possible. So Fabrizio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tricia, and it's a pleasure to hear with you, and it will be a pleasure also to host the Cities Forum in Torino. It's a big opportunity for Torino to host the most important event organized by European Commission for European cities. And I think this is the results of a longer process of interest and commitment of Torino regarding the use of European money. I think the European Commission, the European institution, consider the cities are very important stakeholders in order to implement their policies. And they allocate a lot of resources, financial resources, technical resources, in order to help the cities to innovate their policies. And in fact, you have to think about the history of Torino. Our department 10 years ago was composed more or less by 5 people. Now we are 30 people, and now we are managed more than 800 million euros coming from European institutions, which means that the European funds now are very important regarding not just only to push innovation, but also to promote urban transformation in our cities and to produce a systematic change. Now, the key word in our policies is not only innovation, now the key word is impact. What we try to do is to use European money to create social, economic, and environment impact. So for now, that is what is very important, is not just only to test idea or new initiatives, new measure, new policy, but to evaluate these ideas, to evaluate if they can create change and change our policies. So we have a new generation of European funds, and so it's very important for cities to change their organization in order to use in the best way these resources. So that's why we are here. That's why we are hosting, I think, this important event, because we have shown that in last year we have developed different initiatives, different policies. We have implemented different urban regeneration programs. And in which way? We try to adopt the approach, the methodology that are suggested by European Commission. So which means integrated approach, multidisciplinary approach, but most important, collective approach. So for us, what's very important when we use European money is to create the condition in order to help the citizens, the local community, to invest in new opportunities, to invest in new policies in a collaborative way. So to engage the community, to relaunch new services, to recreate a new condition for better policies. So that's why we have invested a lot of money in social innovations. That's why we have invested a lot of money in tangible and intangible infrastructures, enable to create the best way for the community to express the idea, they produce the services, and to try to, in some way, face very complex challenge. As you know, the climate issues, the social issues are a very big challenge, a very complex challenge. And what we have learned is it's very important to face this problem adopting a collective approach. So that's why for us, social innovation is to adopt collective approach with citizens, with enterprises, with no-profit organization, with the university. And so this is the key word of a lot of our policies. And when we decide to use European money, the idea is also to engage the citizens and the local actors in this project. So this is more or less is my introduction. That's why the European money is very important for the cities. That's why the cities now invest a lot of European money. And I want to give the floor to Giulietta and Giovanni to tell more about initiatives that have been implemented thanks through European resources.
Excuse me. Thank you so much, Fabrizio. And I think it's so important that reflection on how really that this notion of social innovation, which is for a long time was kind of this fuzzy idea, is being grounded in these very concrete, not only concepts, but actually actual projects at the local level, which we're going to hear more about from Giulietta and Giovanni. So thank you so much for setting that context. It's very, very important. You set the stage. So now over to you, Giulietta.
Okay, thank you, Tricia. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll try to share my screen now. Okay. Okay, so I'll try to give you in a few minutes the frame in which all the actions and intervention Fabrizio explained you before took place. Starting more or less 25, 30 years ago. That is the period in which Torino, that has always been, I've always seen as a one company town, a great town, nothing so interesting to do or to see. A city that in 25 years, more or less, changed a lot and underwent a profound transformation. So just to give you some orientation, we are in the Western Alp region, and today we have more or less 900,000 inhabitants in our city, you see here. And this is the classical image of Torino, and that was so familiar to more or less everyone for at least a couple of decades. So a great city. We see here is an image of one of the largest factory areas in the northern part of the city, with a population that was employed for more than 60% in factories. And today the proportion is completely the opposite, because today the majority of the population is employed in services. So you see here the surface that was occupied by factories during the economic boom that the city lived between the 60s and the 80s. The violet areas are the surfaces that were occupied by industries on the territory. And this is the progressive shutdown that was triggered by the manufacturing crisis that exploded at the beginning of the 80s. And you see the largest is the circle, the black circle you see on the surface. The largest is the industrial areas that closed between the 80s and the 90s. What to do with such a challenge? Because the city in a few years had to handle more or less 10 million square meters of former industrial surface inside the city. So the challenge was very big, because the administration had to design a new agenda and to find new planning tools, and also to use all the new opportunities that in the 90s were emerging. I'm talking specifically about the European funds that the city could use to implement the urban regeneration, and so to design a new cityscape, also to put in a new position the city on the economical and geographical scenario at Italian, on European, international level. So the idea was to turn Torino in a real European city that could be competitive and innovative, focusing on its tradition, on its know-how. Turin has always been considered a city where, with a huge know-how in doing things and to produce services and products. So this knowledge was considered as a real asset for structuring a new economy, and so to also to redesign the identity of the city on this. And so one of the first action that were undertaken was to work on the physical and also economical and social redevelopment, overlapping the different layers altogether. So the main strategies were implemented starting from the mid-90s, and that were in a way guided by a peculiar tool that was a planning tool, the master plan for the city that was adopted in 1995, were starting in recovering the ancient city, to redefine the imagine of the city as the city of culture, because of its huge Baroque architectural heritage. Second, to build over the built, because we had, as I told you, 10 million square meters of empty surfaces inside the city and also very near the city center. And third, to reorganize the urban structures. So to work a lot on accessibility and connection of Torino with the rest of the territory. And of course, to reuse a lot of industrial areas that were now available. So starting from the city center, very intensive action of pedestrianization has been done. So in refurbishing public spaces, so turning all the ancient squares from parking lots to real public space for the inhabitants, and so fostering also the quality of urban space and the quality given by the Baroque heritage of a lot of the buildings that occupy the city center. You see here some pictures of this progressive change that the city undertook throughout the 90s. And so a very intensive work has been done on all the fabric, the built fabric of the city center. So you see here an example of what was one of the principal ancient squares of the city, Piazza San Carlo, that was, as you can see, in the 70s used as a parking lot. And then the works done thanks to the Winter Olympics of 2006 that catalyzed a lot of projects and processes that already were undertaken, but that were waiting for new opportunities and, of course, resources to be implemented. And you see the square as it is now. So the opportunity of having such a Baroque heritage has been used as a real container for culture. So in enhancing the opportunities given by this building for hosting museums and cultural initiatives in order to really redesign the cultural profile of the city. And thanks to this real careful strategy, that today Turin ranks as the 5th tourist destination in Italy, thanks, for example, to museums such as the Egyptian Museum or the National Museum of Cinema. And also the work done, always talking about the cultural heritage, but also environmental heritage, the work done in real implementing the green crown, the green garland of the royal residences, putting into a real system of culture and environment all around the city, the several royal residences and linking them through bicycle paths and green paths in a real new cultural and touristic system. And so you see, for example, the Veneria Royal Residence or the Rivoli Castle, Stupinigi, and so forth and so on, that today really have really redefined the new profile of Torino. Together with this action on the cultural and touristical side, there have been a real profound, a very deep work on the infrastructure of the city. So the idea was to connect the city, to make it more accessible, and together with this, to find new programs for all the industrial areas that occupied a lot of spaces very, very near the city center. You see here, this is the city center, the River Po, and this is the scheme of the master plan adopted in 1995. So there are, this plan was very interesting because with a few design images synthesize a lot of immaterial actions that were intended to foster this new identity of Torino. So a central backbone built over the railway line that cut the city for 13 kilometers north to south, and to see again to part of the city that were divided for many decades, very, very near the city center. An environmental axis, the one that is the Po one, the River Po one, to be fostered as the place for leisure and public space for the inhabitants. and the progressive other projects that throughout the years were added to these schemes. So all the environmental work that has been done on the 4 rivers that cross the city, and also the first metro line that have been implemented thanks to the Winter Olympics, and the project for the second line that we are waiting to be implemented in more or less in 1 or 2 years. And so you see here the major intervention, as I told you, the central backbone, these axes that runs north to south throughout the city and connects the former gray areas, such as the one where now there's the redoubled premises of the Politecnico di Torino, the university here in one of the 2 universities here in Torino, and other former workshops that now have been turned into cultural or innovation and technological hubs. You see here a section of the central backbone, so the railway underground and this boulevard for cars and bicycles and so forth on the ground level. And all the intervention on the major gray areas that are touched by the central backbone. So you see, this is the major of the 4th one that have been pinpointed by the master plan. Oh, sorry, the master plan of the 1995, where now Parco d'Ora is 45 hectares of public space that have been given back to the inhabitants of this neighborhood that were just factories for the production of iron and tires for the Fiat car production, and that today is a brand new public space where people gather on the green, on greenery, but also with pieces of the industrial memories that have been preserved throughout through this space in order to, in a way, to preserve these huge and important heritage that the city still has. And then all the work done, all these availability of gray areas has been turned into opportunity also for the 2 universities that are here in Torino, that attract more or less 15,000 foreign students. That now, thanks to different intervention throughout the city, can use new services and spaces for all the university in the city, so libraries and so forth and so on. And so you see here, as you can see here, more or less 200,000 square meters of gray areas have been changed into new educational sites. And as Fabrizio said before, the European programs and funds, so both the methodology and the investments, were one of the greatest opportunities that the city could use to go on with this huge process of transformation. Because in this case, starting from the mid-90s, Torino, that anyway always had a kind of tradition of working with the third sector NGOs and for the social regeneration, could implement all the different programs that were foreseen by the European Union to work peculiarly in specific neighborhoods in the northern part of the city and the southern part, the neighborhoods where the former factories were and where there were more critical situations from the social and economical point of view, but also in terms of public space and physical situation of these spaces. So so from these days, but Giovanni after will be able to explain much better than I can do, the real implementation of a social infrastructure that today really is one of the highlights of the policies that Torino is working at, that are very, very peculiar for Torino. And so working together with the many, many resources and social opportunities that the city has, and also putting together social and physical regeneration. So all the community hubs that have been implemented and the different initiatives that always put together all these different layers of regeneration. So you see here, for example, one of the first neighborhood houses that have been created, starting from the beginning of the 2000s, here Cascina Roccafranca, or the temporary residences that have been implemented thanks to also the support of some private bank foundations that here in Torino works a lot together with the public administration in implementing such interventions, and all the work for that put together social and environmental regeneration. So the community gardens, and the implementation of progressive real network of such gardens that are real hubs for people to join and to take care of their environment they're living. And this also thanks to all the work done by the public sector with the setting up a real set of rules for using urban commons and using such an approach for working on the smallest pieces of the city that need to be regenerated. And looking at a larger scale, the green infrastructure, the approach to the green infrastructure is on the one of the background of all these actions that, thanks to a strategic plan that tries to use the greenery and the analysis of the ecosystem services as starting points for future plannings that take in account the importance of the environmental issue that is getting always more and more important. And so all the analysis on the resources and opportunity that the green system that Torino has can be very useful for continuing in transforming the city. So you see here we have a quite huge green heritage, thanks to a lot of public parks and the hillside that runs over the eastern side of the city. And so this is, I'm trying to be faster as I can. So you see here the main strategies that have been led by the city throughout the years that can help you to understand the framework in which we are working. So the importance of the public-private partnership in implementing the transformation, in trying to attract market-oriented initiatives, and also to attract foreign investments that after the the golden age of the 90s, and also after the crisis of 2008 is getting very, very important to us. And one of the characteristics of all this transformation has always been the role of the public sector, that has always been the real director of all the transformation, that always tried to find a negotiation with the private and all the stakeholders playing on the field in order to get as much resource, as much public effects as they can from all the private actions of transformation. And then the importance, the role of urban commons today in continuing changing the city, and the ecological perspective from this point of view. So here you find some of the key issues that today we have to tackle that, looking at a metropolitan, from a metropolitan point of view, because Turin is a metropolitan city, so we have to deal with a huge territory that is very variegated, because we have the mountainside, the hillside, and the plain side, so very different context to be put together and try to find a common ground to share problems. Problems such as a shrinking population and a quite old population. You have to consider that in Torino the average is 47 years old. So and also problems with unemployment, mainly for youngsters, of course, and also the fact that we have a quite attractive university system, but we also have to deal with the problem that once students have graduated, usually tends to go away. So we have to find opportunities to be offered to all these students that come to Torino to study and often choose other cities, other opportunities outside Torino. And also a system, productive system that is now made of almost of small and medium enterprises that are quite lively, but that maybe still have a quite low capacity of innovation. So these are the main issues that the city and the metropolitan territory is trying to tackle. And just I want to end with the possible guidelines to face such challenges that are mainly 5. So the city is working at designing a new general plan, that because we still have a plan that has been adopted in 1995. So it's a plan that today is old and is no more responsive to the challenges that today we have. And all the works, the necessary work on infrastructures, so metro line, but in general, the connection, a better connection with the rest of the territory. The work on public spaces, so because working on public space is to respond to social demands for quality of life. And all the work with temporary uses, that is one of the key to start regenerating pieces of city that in other ways couldn't start this transformation. And all the work on housing policies, because we have a quite high housing need, housing demand. And so from this point of view, also the use of, for example, temporary residencies can be one of the possible answers to a variegated demand that is always changing throughout the years. So this is more or less what we experienced in more or less 25 years. I hope that it has been quite clear, but I'm available to any further question. Thank you.
Wow, Giulietta, I've heard a version of this presentation before, and I'm still always learning so many new things about Torino, even from the past. And I won't take too much time to comment because I want to pass the floor to Giovanni. But I think for me, what really stood out is, how you mentioned, as in the title of your presentation, how the Turin has taken the gray areas, brownfield sites, or disused industrial buildings, and turn them into opportunities. And I think that's where there's really a point of learning, because that is an issue for a lot of cities, maybe not at the scale of Torino, but we know that across Europe and Latin America and North America, that's an issue of dealing with brown field sites and gray areas, and also how you're very clear about the role of the public sector as the enabler, working, of course, with the private sector at different levels at different times, depending on how the economy was going, and also the city's commitment to social inclusion and participation, and finally having it very clear with data, what are the current problems and challenges that the city is facing, and how that feeds into your last slide about the paradigm shift in urban policy. So you in 20 minutes covering that amount of material is very impressive. So thank you so much. And there are great slides and diagrams and information there. So now we're going to pass the floor to Giovanni, who's going to talk in more detail about what's happening on the ground, if you will, and local projects, and yeah, making it a lot of what the context that Giulietta and Fabrizio have given us, and putting it in kind of concrete people and places. So Giovanni, over to you.
Thank you, Tricia. Good morning, everyone. I'm now sharing my presentation. Just a minute. Okay, is it working? Yeah, I guess. Oh, I put it just. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thanks also to Giulietta for the presentation. That I will be really in line with the things Giulietta mentioned about some of the transformation and some of the approaches that the city of Turin adopted in the last few decades. I will talk about a specific kind of places and project we worked on and we have now in the city, which are the Case del Quartiere. In English could be translated as neighborhood houses. We will see afterwards which kind of places they are, and about urban regeneration and how these neighborhood houses are connected with the urban regeneration policies in the city of Turin. Well, firstly, let's say urban regeneration in Turin has now quite a long story, as Giulietta was mentioning before, and it's almost always related with the idea of adopting an integrated approach. It's very much linked with the urban approach that the European Union adopted firstly in 1994, let's say in the late 90s, as an idea to strengthen the level of integration between sectorial policies as a way to cope with the urban crisis in the late 90s. So this integrated approach is a distinctive, feature of the urban regeneration policies we are talking about. As I said, it's now quite a long story that began in the late 90s with a general project of the city administration that was called Progetto Periferia, meaning a project devoted to that peripheral area of the city, that neighborhood that were in a fragile situation in terms of social and territorial disparities. And the neighborhood houses are, in a way, a result of that policies. The basic and keyword of this kind of urban regeneration projects are to be place-based, to be deeply rooted in a given area of the city, and to be people-centered, integrating different action, different policies towards these two objectives. And last but not least, to act in a collaborative framework, establishing in different ways, with different local histories, will very much site-specific kind of approach, collaborative forms of governance between the city administration and the third sector organization. So let's move to the Casa del Quartiere. What is a Casa del Quartiere? What is a neighborhood house? Well, afterwards we will see some photos and pictures, but the best way to see what a Casa del Quartiere, what a neighborhood house is to go and see it, because it's not that easy to simply describe them. The neighborhood houses are community center, are a place, a building with an open space that, as I said before, come as sometimes a proper output of an urban regeneration project, sometimes an outcome that, born after a process, a local process of urban regeneration. They can be described as social, cultural laboratories in which different ideas and projects and needs take place. They are very much socially mixed. And this is one of the objectives of this kind of place, of not being a place for disadvantaged people, not being a place for the elderly, not being a place for young people, but being a place in which different people mixes. They are a place in which you have space to co-design and to, by co-designing things, to working on community building, on self-identity, empowerment, and so on. We sometimes describe neighborhood houses also as a proper tool of new form of urban welfare. Not the traditional forms of welfare. They don't substitute, of course, the ordinary mainstream welfare services such as social services or education and so on and so forth, but they can cope with new form of welfare in a city that grows more and more complex. Basically, the 8 neighborhood houses now that we now have in the city of Turin are regulated by a memorandum of understanding between the city and the different entities that host, that manage the neighborhood houses. and with the financial support of the Compagnia di San Paolo Foundation, which is a local foundation that works on very different projects, many different projects. As I said, 8 places in different neighborhoods of the city. Firstly, they have to be welcoming. They have to be placed open to participatory practices. They have to be open to all, as I said. This happen via different kind of activities, from cultural events to help desk services, to courses, and they welcome different kind of subject, from the individuals, from the to the informal groups, to the association. There has to be a high level of accessibility. There has to be some free activities or low popular prices. There has to be a high organizational accessibility. In the neighborhood houses, you have a direct contact with operators, with persons that interact with the other people, with the other association of the neighborhood in a simple, direct way. There has to be, of course, a high level of cultural accessibility, of openness and respectfulness of the diversity among the multiple identities of the city communities. Relationship is key in the everyday life of the neighborhood houses. Here, in some of the next slide, I will show you also some data that comes from a social impact assessment that the network of neighborhood houses did in 2019, before the pandemic. The pandemic, of course, as you can imagine, is the contrary of being nearby in the same places, so the data were difficult to collect. Just to give you some figure, among around 3,000 different activities, 42% are completely free of charge, 40% are at low prices, and these about 10% are up to you, and so on. Another important thing, the neighborhood house is never the headquarters of or the seats of a given NGO or a given association. We will see afterwards, there's a body that manages the neighborhood house, but it has to be open to different various projects. As I said before, very different kind of activities, from help desk to courses to many other things. Again, some figure of the different kind of activity, cultural events, courses, social inclusion activity, and this kind of thing. This is the, it is just to give you the idea of the variety of the different activities hosted in the neighborhood houses. And this is an estimate of the person passing during a year in the 8 neighborhood houses present in the city territory. Second important thing, every neighborhood house has to be deeply rooted in the neighborhood, in what happened on the field. Being rooted on what happened on the field is one of the key of effective urban regeneration policies. So there has to be room to for local organization, space for activity. The neighborhood houses are properly antennas, both receiving information, being deeply rooted in the territory, and transmitting as some sort of intermediary subject between the city policies and what is happening on the field, and the citizen, the active citizenship. They are bridges. You can use different metaphor to describe this kind of intermediate role, but this is basically the idea. Again, this figure gives you an idea of how many kind of different subjects interact in this world of the neighborhood houses of the city of Turin. As I said before, 8 different neighborhood houses, 8 different forms of governance. Why so? Because every neighborhood house, because it's deeply rooted in the neighborhood, was born with a different story. So the governance, the level of governance, the model of governance they decided to have is linked to every site-specific story that you can describe case by case. The entities and organization that manages the neighborhood houses are association. There's one community foundation, which is a specific kind of foundation we experimented in the neighborhood of Mirafiori. A public foundation, again, another kind of subject. I don't have time to elaborate on the details of this kind of organization, but as you can see, there's again, I think that this gives you the idea that also the model, the governance model, is the result of, I would call it an experimental attitude. The idea to experiment different, the proper way to manage things at local level. But they have there's something in common, and is the fact that they are always in one way, with different story, with different, also in terms of resources, of money, of effort, of the two subjects, but they are always the result of the collaboration between the city administration and third sector entities, generally speaking. So again, that's the idea of being an intermediate place. They are definitely open to all, public, collective, but they are something in between a private management and a public management. So they are also always in search of the right balance between being economically autonomous in economic terms, self-sustainable, let's say, and public support. But a part of public support is, in my opinion, necessary. Otherwise, you have to survive on the market, which is not always easy. In order to improve the self-sustainability, of course, almost every neighborhood houses have some business activities, typically a restaurant, a cafeteria, which of course is not only a way to be self-sustainable, partially self-sustainable, it's also a way to improve social interaction, is a way to being a place open to people that want to stay there just to have a drink, have a coffee, talk with other people, and being properly open. Another important thing that has to be said about the management, the governance of the neighborhood houses, is the kind of mixed skill required to manage this kind of places. You have to mix different competencies, different skill in the social, relational field, but you have to be also a cultural organizer, and you have to be aware of all the complexity of the administrative and management skills. Sometimes this kind of people, it has been described as a sort of social artisan, social craftsman. I mean, in the sense that is the kind of professional that is deeply rooted on doing things with other people and also in learning by doing. Again, some figure on how many people are working in the neighbor houses, and I guess that in this slide is not described the high level of voluntary works that, I mean, is part of the success of the neighborhood houses. The 8 neighborhood houses are also a network. This has been a process because every neighborhood houses, as I said before, was born with a different story, with a different link to a given urban regeneration program. And at a certain point in time, we both realized, we, the city administration and the people of the neighborhood houses, that there was something in common and that a proper network activity would have been would have been of help in, I mean, in supporting the kind of activity that they are doing. They began to work together on a call for a national award organized by the national NGOs that helped to strengthen the link between the different houses. They work on a network project. One of the results was to the definition, the writing down of a proper manifesto that describe what a neighborhood house have to be. They organized a national conference on this approach, and in 2017 they properly established a second-level association, meaning an association of the different subject that manages the 8 neighborhood houses. In 2019, there's been the first social impact evaluation that the network of the neighborhood houses commissioned in order to better know what are the results of their being in the city. And the last thing I would mention is that into the fact that there's a network of neighborhood houses turned out to be a key resource in coping with the COVID-19 emergency, because during the lockdown, every neighborhood house, of course, have to closed, but they turned into a resource for a number of emergency activity, collecting food for people that were not, I mean, that can't afford because they were isolated or they were in economic crisis and so on and so forth. So it became an important tool for social policy that copes with the pandemic. Very last thing I would like to mention is that this network, of course, is a key part of what I would call the urban regeneration local ecosystem. Just to give you some example, in two important projects that we managed in the last few years, the neighborhood houses play a key role, and we're a key partner of the city. In the Co-City project, the Co-City project were meant to use co-design and co-management of urban commons as a tool for urban regeneration. And the two-night project that Fabrizio knows very well, because I was the project manager of Co-City and Fabrizio is now the project manager of Tonight. This second project also that works in inclusion in public space to improve the safety and the perception of residents at nighttime, the safety perception of residents at nighttime. I mean,
Giovanni, if we could just, sorry, just wrap up in the next minute or so, so we have the last 10 minutes for some questions.
Okay, I'm really finishing. Last slide. This is the very last, the most recent project we are working on, which is an integrated urban plan financed under the Next Generation EU framework, which is focused on local libraries as a key social infrastructure. And again, the plan's keyword are culture, accessibility, inclusion, and participation that resonates with what we're talking about in this presentation. And again, the neighborhood houses will be one of the partner of this activity. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry if I'm being a bit late.
No, you weren't. You were just on time. Okay. It gives us just a few minutes here at the end. So thank you so much, Giovanni. It was a great presentation, and the only thing I'll say by way of comment, although I could say a lot, but I want to leave time, is that I think it really beautifully came back to Fabrizio's opening, talking about moving from social innovation to social impact. So not only are you sort of, you could say, walking the talk, and not just saying place-based, people-centered, but actually it is place-based and people-centered, and then you have the evidence base and the data to back that up, to know that what's happening on the ground is actually having the desired impact. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much for that. We have a few questions. We don't have a lot of time, and this is a big question, but maybe you could talk on it probably for 2 days. But Mariana Gomez from Brazil, a while ago, this was during Giulietta's presentation, what was the political context for these transformations that happened in Torino? And how is the local administration electoral changes dealt with? I know that is a really big question, but if it's possible to give a kind of quick overview to that, who wants to dive into that, whether that's Giulietta or Fabrizio or Giovanni.
Well, I can answer to the two question Sandra Marine asked about the Mirafiori Nord via Poma via Scarsellini area. No, unfortunately, I mean, we are working on that area, but I mean, in the short term, there are no financing available, but we are working on it. Second question by Pablo Llanes Mena. Is all the city represented through these 8 neighborhood houses? Oh, no, there are some quarters that don't have neighborhood houses, but we are working to building new one. One of our objective for the next few years is to, I mean, we are working together with the neighborhood houses network, together with the 8 neighborhood houses to, I mean, support, to accompany the birth of new neighborhood houses. I mean, I think in the short term, 1 or 2 new neighborhood houses will see the light, I hope.
Great, thank you, Giovanni. Giulietta, do you, would you be able to address Mariana's question, which I know is a big one, but to say something kind of briefly about the political context for the big transformations that have happened in Torino in 2 minutes or less? I know it's maybe it's too big. You're on mute. Oh, it looked like Giulietta is.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yes, it's a huge question. Okay. What we could say that in the 2 decades, the political context was the one that was defined. Maybe one important thing is the law that in 1993 in Italy let the citizens of the city to choose directly their mayor. And thanks to this, after a very difficult period, but also very fruitful period that the cities experiences while the industrial crisis and economical one exploded at the end of the 70s, more or less. So with also huge political and also social effects on the city. And all these seasons have been led, very, very difficult season, have been led by the left-wing administration. In 1993, people at the elections, people chose a mayor that wasn't a political, but he was a professor at the Politecnico di Torino, the university, and he was in a way the expression of an elite of different stakeholders that, but however, center left orientation, that were the expression of the cultural and but also academic, but yes, economic, political milieu that was trying to pinpoint the resources and the opportunity that the city could use to redefine a new identity. So from this point of view, it was with this mayor whose name was Valentino Calstellani, the city really started a fruitful season where maybe classical political definition or belonging to classical parties can be used. So it was much more, we could say also a civil, yes, or Gianni and Fabrizio, if you want to add things, of course, please do it, because it's very, very difficult to explain that.
Yes, Trisha, it's very difficult questions. And the reason that we were not involved in this season of public transformation directly, so it's also difficult for us to give, we'll say, a right position. But just to give, it's important to know that when Torino started to implement urban transformation, it was an incredible season of funding, of national funding and European funding. So the funds were not a problem in that season. So it was, let me say, quite easy, to use resources if you had good ideas. And
yes.
After the 2006, the situation is completely changed. Torino was reversed in a financial crisis. So that's why we invest a lot of innovation in sustainability and a collaborative approach, because we didn't have more money, public money, to invest in transformation. And this pushed us to ask the help, the contribution of art institutions, art private stakeholders, and more important, the citizens. And so this is the consequence, I think, but this is my personal idea, that when now we can talk about urban commons, co-design, co-creation, co-management, collective approach, collaboration governance, because we understood the importance to take these issues in a collective way, because it depends on the season. Sometimes we have resources. Now, in this time, we have a lot of resources, for example, thanks to EU Next Generation programs. But if I have talked about the 2 years ago, the situation was completely different. And so that's why it was very important to innovate the policy, and that's why we decided to focus our attention of European policies and the resources that the European Commission put at disposal of the cities.
Listen, Trisha, if I can add just something, I agree with both Giulietta and Fabrizio. In this season that began in the early 90s, as Giulietta was mentioning, till now, from the early 90s till now, I would say that for the things that I've mentioned before, urban regeneration policy, there has been a different political coalition, mostly center-left coalition, but I see some sort of continuity in this field. I think that the most important thing that influenced the differences are what Fabrizio was mentioning: financial external factor, financial crisis, and availability of funding. For instance, in this moment, we have this big funding, post-pandemic funding, but we are still in a huge financial crisis from the local budgeting point of view. So mostly external factors, but general, I mean, of course, not in all the things, but on neighborhood houses, on urban regeneration processes, and so on and so forth. I would say some sort of continuity along the years.
Well,
Patricia,
thank you. So yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
If you just in order also to answer the question about the European Bauhaus, maybe I think that the key point of our strategy in the early 19 in order to implement the Urban Regeneration program and to transform this area in a new livable neighborhood, the key point was the culture and the beauty, which are the key element of now of a European Bauhaus. The question was not only to be more inclusive, to maybe design new services for local residents, to create more connection between public administration, citizens, to create new houses and so on. But the point was to create cultural events in order to create a community, to redesign this area using the concept of beauty. And this point are perfectly in line with the new paradigm of European Bauhaus. That's why now we are also very happy to try to adopt this principle, which are being promoted by European Commission.
That fits very well into the Italian ethos, culture and beauty. Thank you. I mean, that's a beautiful note to wrap up this session. And as I said at the beginning, I was really looking forward to it, and it has definitely more than met my expectations. And actually, that question, thank you, Giulietta, for diving in on the political question, because I think actually it created this really nice, in just a few minutes, with the additional comments from Fabrizio and Giovanni, you know, kind of the context of the last 40 years for the transformation that's happened when you did have funds, then you didn't have funds, and then now you have funds again, but in a different context, and what that's meant for Torino, rebirth and transformation. So I know there are many people who are in the audience today who will be joining us in Torino, and I know this has been a great preview and precursor for actually being in the city. And for those of you who won't be at the city's forum, probably you want to go to Torino now, and you certainly learned a lot of things. And luckily, because Torino has been involved in so many programs, there's a lot of information about Torino's processes and projects available online. We'll share this presentation. We'll share the recording of this session. We'll share the Giovanni and Giulietta's presentations as well in a follow-up email. And I believe there's a survey at the end of this, if you could fill it in quickly. So the only thing left to say is a big mille grazie, Giulietta, Fabrizio, Giovanni. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. And thank you so much for your time, and good luck in your continued work with making Torino a green, reborn, transformed, beautiful cultural city.
Thank
and
you.
have a good rest to everyone in the audience. Thanks for joining us, and have a good rest of your day or evening. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a nice day.